All right, ready for a deep dive. Today we're looking at something pretty interesting. It's about the challenges Western Baha'is face when it comes to sharing their faith.
It's a big conversation, though, isn't it? It's like, how do societal trends, all the stuff happening around us, how does that impact, people's beliefs?
Exactly. And we're going to be looking at a document called Challenges Western Baha'is Face in Advancing the Faith, an urgent call to reflection and action. And, let me tell you, it is packed with insights. We're going to be rethinking, I think, how we approach almost any kind of effort to create change in the world.
What's really interesting is that this document, it was written for Baha'is, but it really highlights these tensions that, I think they exist to any group that's trying to balance individual expression with, with group goals.
Yeah. And the document, it lays out like five main challenges. And honestly, my brain is already doing like backflips,
Yeah.
trying to connect all these challenges to my own life.
Well, let's break it down, one by one. Let's unpack it. What feels most relevant to you right now as we get started here?
For me, honestly, it's this whole clash between individualism and unity. That's something that constantly I'm bumping up against. It's like, on one hand, we're told, celebrate your uniqueness, be yourself. Then on the other hand, it's like, how do we actually work together? How do we do that effectively? And this document, it really dives into how this plays out for Western Baha'is specifically.
And it really does challenge some assumptions, right? The Baha'i teachings, they emphasize that unity, it doesn't mean that everyone becomes identical. It's more about recognizing that we're all interconnected, but still valuing the individual contributions that each person can make.
That's where it gets really interesting for me. It's like, instead of seeing this as like an either-or, individualism or unity, it's like the Baha'i writings are suggesting that they can enhance each other.
Exactly. And there's this really, really powerful anecdote in the document about a local spiritual assembly that's like a local Baha'i governing council. And they were having a hard time making decisions because everyone was just so focused on their own viewpoints. But then when they shifted their focus to finding solutions that would benefit the whole community, it's like their individual talents, they actually became more effective.
It's like that saying, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right?
Yes. And this idea that, unity, it can actually unlock individual potential, that just feels relevant to any group, whether it's like a team at work or a family or even a whole society. This is something that we can all relate to.
Okay, mind blown. And this tension between the individual and the collective, it really comes to the forefront when we look at this next challenge that's in the document, the issue of prejudice and cultural superiority. And I'm curious, how does this play out in a faith that emphasizes the oneness of humanity?
Well, this is where the Baha'i teachings get pretty radical. They just state straight up, all humans are fundamentally equal, regardless of, race, religion, gender, anything. And the document, it highlights how this directly challenges a lot of the prejudices that are prevalent in Western society.
Right, because even if you believe in equality, there can still be all these unconscious biases that we've absorbed, from our culture. So how do you actually live that principle? How do you live that oneness?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And the document, it uses the example of the Baha'i community in the U.S. and how they've been grappling with systemic racism. And it's a powerful reminder that just saying we're all equal isn't enough. You actually have to actively dismantle these ingrained systems of prejudice.
So it's not just about being welcoming, right? It's about creating spaces where everyone genuinely feels like they belong.
Exactly. And that ties into this idea from the Baha'i writings that true unity, it requires us to go beyond just tolerating differences. We're actually called to celebrate the diversity of humanity while working towards a common goal.
It's like, instead of being a melting pot, it's more like a mosaic,
Mm-hmm.
Like each piece is unique and beautiful, but together they create this intricate and stunning whole.
I love that. It's a great analogy. It really captures the essence of what the Baha'i faith is trying to achieve.
All right, so we've got this tension between the individual and the collective, the challenge of overcoming prejudice. What's the next hurdle? What's the next hurdle that Western Baha'is are facing according to this document?
Well, this one, I think we can all relate to this. It's this tendency for intellectualism to kind of overshadow spirituality. In Western culture, there's a huge emphasis on knowledge and analysis. But sometimes that comes at the expense of actually putting our beliefs into action.
I feel that. It's like you can read a whole book on healthy eating, but that doesn't mean you're going to put down the donuts.
Exactly. The document gives this example of a Baha'i academic who writes these brilliant papers about the faith's principles, but they don't actually participate in community life or service projects.
Yeah, that hits close to home.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the intellectual side of faith that we forget to actually, live it.
And that's where this document, it challenges us, The Baha'i teachings, they emphasize that true understanding, it isn't just about knowledge, it's about translating that knowledge into action, into service to others.
Okay, so how do we avoid falling into that trap? How do we make sure that our beliefs are actually, reflected in our actions?
I think that's a question that each of us has to wrestle with,
Yeah.
It's a personal question. But what I find so helpful about the Baha'i teachings is that they offer practical guidance on how to integrate spirituality into daily life.
So it's not just a bunch of lofty ideas, they're actual tools and practices to help us make that connection.
Exactly. And that leads us to another challenge that this document explores, which is the potential pitfalls of relying too heavily on Western methods when it comes to sharing the Baha'i teachings.
Okay, now this is where I start to get a little confused. I mean, isn't it good to be organized and efficient? What's wrong with using, effective strategies to spread a message?
It's not about the strategies themselves. It's about making sure that those strategies are aligned with the spiritual aims of the faith. The document, it cautions against just blindly adopting approaches that might be effective in the, corporate world or political sphere, but they lack that deeper spiritual coherence.
Okay, can you give me an example? Help me wrap my head around this.
Sure. So imagine a Baha'i community. They're organizing an event to share the teachings, right? And they decide to use really aggressive marketing tactics, like the kind you might see for a new product. Now, while that might attract a large crowd, it also risks kind of reducing the profound message of the faith to a catchy slogan or a fleeting trend.
Ooh, that's a good point. It's if you're trying to share something that's meant to transform people's hearts and minds, you can't just treat it like a commodity to be bought and sold.
Exactly. The document argues that the methods we use, they should be in harmony with the spiritual essence of the message we're sharing.
So it's about being mindful of the how as much as the what.
Precisely. And this emphasis on action, on action over just intellectual understanding, it really comes to the forefront when we look at the next challenge.
It's about intentionality, right?
Yeah.
Making sure our actions line up with our principles, which, it makes me think about the next challenge, the one about complacency and lack of sacrifice.
Ah, yes, that's a big one. This is where things get, well, I guess you could say personal. How our environment, even our comforts, they can really impact our spiritual growth.
Yeah, it's easy to just get swept up in daily life, right?
Yeah.
Especially when, our society kind of values material success, and just being comfortable.
Absolutely. And the document, it highlights how this can lead to a decline in that spirit of selflessness, and sacrifice, the kind of spirit that characterized those early Baha'is.
It's true. Those early believers, I mean, they were facing persecution. They were risking their lives to spread the teachings. It really puts our, busy schedules into perspective.
Right. The document gives this example, and it's very relatable. This successful professional, a devoted Baha'i, and they believe in the teachings, but they're struggling to find time for, service or to share their faith just because of, the demands of their career.
I think we've all felt that, right? That feeling of just being pulled in a million directions. How do we balance, the need to take care of ourselves and our responsibilities with this call to, to be actively engaged in creating a better world?
It is a constant balancing act, yeah. And this is where the Baha'i teachings on moderation and detachment from material things, that's where that comes in. It's not about rejecting success or comfort, but recognizing that true fulfillment comes from aligning our actions with, a higher purpose.
So it's about asking ourselves, what am I willing to sacrifice?
Yeah.
To make a positive impact.
Exactly. It's about reevaluating our priorities, even in small ways. Maybe it's spending less time on social media and more time, connecting with our communities. Or maybe it's, making a conscious effort to incorporate acts of service into our daily routine.
These challenges, they're really making me think about all the subtle ways our culture influences our values. And our actions. What stands out to you? What's the most surprising or impactful takeaway from this document?
What I find fascinating is how the document frames these challenges. It's not just as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth.
Ooh, I like that. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. Each of these challenges, it forces us to confront, aspects of ourselves that might be holding us back. That tension between individualism and unity, for example, it pushes us to examine, how much our ego is driving our decisions.
So it's like these challenges, they're gifts in disguise. Like they're forcing us to stretch and grow in ways that we might not, otherwise choose to.
Exactly. It's in those moments, those moments of friction, of discomfort that we have the potential to transform, to become more aligned with our higher selves.
It's like that saying, smooth seas don't make skillful sailors.
Exactly. And what I find so inspiring about the Baha'i teachings is that they offer a roadmap, for navigating these turbulent waters. They provide a set of spiritual principles and practices that can help us, stay anchored amidst the storms of life.
It's like having a compass and a map when you're venturing into uncharted territory.
A perfect analogy. And as we're wrapping up this deep dive into, the challenges facing Western Baha'is, I think it's important to remember that these challenges, well, while they're presented in the context of, one faith, they have universal implications.
You're right. These are human challenges.
Yeah.
We all grapple with these. Doesn't matter what we believe. The pull of individualism versus unity, the struggle to overcome prejudice, the temptation to prioritize intellect over action, the danger of complacency. These are themes that they run through every aspect of human existence.
Exactly. And that's what makes this document so relevant, and thought-provoking. It's not just a guide for Baha'is, it's an invitation to all of us to examine our own lives and to ask ourselves, how can we become more conscious, more unified, and more effective agents of positive change in the world?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? And I think the beauty of it is that there's no one right answer. It's a journey of constant exploration, learning and growing, stumbling and getting back up again.
And it's a journey that we're all on together, even if we're, coming from different starting points and taking different paths. The important thing is that we're all striving towards that same destination, a world where justice and unity and love, prevail.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. We've been talking about all these challenges Western Baha'is are facing, but you've said, that these are really like universal struggles. So for everyone listening, I guess the question is, how can we all use these insights? It doesn't matter what our background is or what we believe. How can we use these insights to become, well, better at creating change in the world? Yeah,
that's the question. And this document, it gives us some clues, I think. It's not about having all the answers. It's more about, it's more about having the right approach, to life's challenges.
What do you mean by that?
Well, instead of getting discouraged or overwhelmed by all these big issues, individualism versus unity, overcoming prejudice, staying spiritually connected when the world is so focused on material things. What if we saw those things as chances to grow, to get stronger?
I like that. It's like each challenge is a chance to practice what we believe. Even when it's hard.
Yeah, exactly. And the Baha'i teachings, they offer some really practical guidance. They emphasize consultation, making decisions together, listening to each other, and trying to find unity even when people disagree.
That makes me think of something you said earlier about how individuality, it actually shines brighter when everyone is unified.
Yeah.
So applying that to this idea of being a change maker, it's not about everyone being the same.
Right. It's about realizing that we each have our own, talents and perspectives. The Baha'i writings, they often compare humanity to a garden, It's beautiful because it's diverse.
So if we want to make the world better, maybe the first step is to look at ourselves. What am I good at? What can I offer?
I think that's a great place to start. And then it's about connecting those gifts, those talents to something bigger. The Baha'i teachings, they encourage us to see service to humanity as the highest form of worship.
So it's not just about what we do, but about why we do it.
Exactly. And the document, it reminds us that service, it doesn't have to be some big, grand thing, It can be small acts of kindness, how we treat our families, how we treat strangers, how we participate in our communities.
I'm seeing a pattern here. It's about being intentional, being aware in every part of our lives. whether it's how we make decisions, how we deal with challenges, or even just how we spend our time.
That's it. That's the heart of it. And it's not about being perfect. We all mess up sometimes. The Baha'i writings, they talk a lot about forgiveness and learning from our mistakes.
It's about progress,
Yeah.
perfection.
Yeah. And I think that's a hopeful message, especially when we look at how complicated the world is and all the challenges we're facing.
So to everyone listening, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this. Embrace the messiness, the imperfections, the fact that we're all still learning and growing. Don't let the challenges scare you. Start where you are. Use what you have. And trust that even small acts of love and kindness and service, they can make a difference. They can ripple outwards and create a more beautiful world, more just world.
Well said. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. We're all connected. And by supporting each other, by inspiring each other, we can create a world that reflects the unity and harmony that I think we all long for.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking. Keep asking questions, keep growing, and keep believing that each of us can make a difference.